It started with a scream. Not the kind that echoes down a hallway and fades, but the kind that freezes the air, sharp and raw, bouncing off the cold concrete of Pelican Bay's isolation unit. Inside the SHU, the security housing unit, an inmate named Marcus Slim Hargrove slammed his fists against the steel door until his knuckles split open. Blood streaked the metal. He shouted, "You think this is justice?" As two correctional officers stood outside his cell, their faces hidden behind black visors. They didn't move. They just watched. Moments earlier, Marcus had been denied his appeal, a case he swore was fixed from the start. Years of evidence, wiped away by what he called a broken system. And now, locked in a windowless cell where the lights never went off, he snapped. Cameras recorded everything, but the footage would never see daylight. As his voice cracked from rage, the guards finally moved in, not to help but to restore order. One officer barked, "Get on the ground," while another raised a can of pepper spray. Seconds later, the corridor filled with choking gas and muffled screams. Through the haze, Marcus fell to his knees, gasping for air. But here's the truth that made the moment so shocking. Marcus wasn't just another inmate. He had once worked inside the system. Before his arrest, he was a clerk in the county courthouse, the same place that processed his own conviction. He knew the judges. He knew the officers. He even knew the prosecutor who buried his case. And now he was buried inside Pelican Bay, the same system he once believed in. As the guards dragged him down the hallway, his voice echoed, "Tell them what's happening here. Tell them what justice really looks like behind these walls." That's when one of the guards whispered under his breath, "Justice doesn't live here, Hargrove. Power does." The sound of the steel door slamming shut swallowed the rest of his words. And as the camera feed flickered, something dark unfolded, a cover-up that would soon reach far beyond the prison walls. But before we go deeper, you have to ask yourself, what if Marcus was right? What if Pelican Bay wasn't just holding criminals, but protecting the ones running the system itself? The day after Marcus's outburst, Pelican Bay's corridors hummed with silence, the kind that hides secrets rather than peace. On the surface, the prison seemed calm, but behind those steel doors, something had shifted. Word spread fast through the tiers. Slim lost it in the SHU. But the story wasn't that simple. The older inmates whispered that Marcus had been digging into things he shouldn't: case files, staff logs, disciplinary reports. He wasn't just another prisoner losing his mind in solitary. He was a man trying to expose what was happening behind the glass and concrete. Before his breakdown, Marcus had worked as an inmate clerk in the legal library. It was one of the few privileges that came with good behavior: access to legal books, case records, and sometimes the right kind of restricted paperwork that others couldn't see. He used to say, "Every system leaves fingerprints, you just have to know where to look." Through smuggled notes and memorized file numbers, he began connecting dots: guards who filed false incident reports, inmates who disappeared after writing grievances, and disciplinary hearings where the outcomes were decided before they even began. The deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. He'd told another inmate, Darnell "Ghost" Murphy, that he was close to finding something that would make the warden sweat. Ghost had shrugged it off. "Bro, this is Pelican Bay. Ain't nobody sweatin', but the ones in these cells." But Marcus wasn't joking. He said he found a chain of falsified documents tied to a single name: Lieutenant Raymond Stokes. Stokes was no ordinary officer. He'd been in Pelican Bay for over 15 years, a man who prided himself on keeping order through fear. Rumor was, if an inmate filed a complaint that got too loud, it ended up on Stokes' desk, and that inmate ended up in solitary or worse. When Marcus started pulling those files, something changed. Guards began searching his cell more often. His library shifts were shortened. His mail was delayed or lost. He even received a disciplinary ticket for disrespecting staff, though he swore he hadn't said a word. Then came the night before the scream. A young guard, Officer Lopez, slipped him a folded note during chow. It read, "They know. Stop digging." "Oh?" Marcus looked up, but Lopez had already walked away. That night, Marcus tore apart the vent above his bed and stuffed the files he'd copied into the duct. It was the only place no one searched. The paperwork detailed patterns, dates, signatures, and disciplinary outcomes that didn't match official records. But more than that, it hinted at something bigger: a secret system of pay-to-transfer deals. Inmates with connections, or the right money on the outside, could buy safer housing or early release recommendations. Those who couldn't? They were labeled security threats and thrown into the SHU indefinitely. Every fake disciplinary ticket meant another month, another year, another life lost behind concrete. When Marcus confronted a sergeant about it, he was warned to drop the lawyer act, or he'd find himself in the hole for good. That same night the guards came. The next morning he screamed. But what happened after the scream was worse. The official report said Marcus attacked an officer. The footage, conveniently, was corrupted. The prison called it an isolated disciplinary incident, but other inmates swore they saw something else. They said Marcus never swung at anyone. They said he was dragged out unconscious. And yet, a week later the warden held a press briefing. He stood at a podium, crisp uniform, silver badge gleaming under fluorescent light, and said calmly, "Pelican Bay operates under the highest standards of justice and order. Any suggestion otherwise is simply false." The crowd of journalists nodded. None of them had ever stepped inside the SHU. None of them had seen the bruises that never made the report. Meanwhile, back inside, the rumor of Marcus's accident spread like wildfire. Some said he'd been transferred. Others said he was gone for good. But Darnell Ghost knew better. He'd been on cleaning duty the morning after the incident, scrubbing dried blood from the floor outside C Block. He didn't ask questions, not out loud, but he started keeping notes. Ghost was different from Marcus. He wasn't trying to change the system. He was just trying to survive it. But what he saw that day wouldn't leave his mind. When he passed the vent in Marcus's old cell, he heard something, the faint flutter of paper inside. He pried it open with a piece of wire, and there it was, a stack of wrinkled pages marked with red ink and coffee stains. Across the top of one page were the words, "Pelican Bay Justice File, Internal Transfers." Ghost didn't understand everything he read, but one thing stood out: there were names, dozens of them. Some belonged to inmates, some to staff, and some to people outside the prison. Names of lawyers, even judges. It was bigger than he thought. He hid the pages under his mattress, unsure what to do. But before he could act, a lockdown was announced. The warden claimed it was due to a security breach. Cells were searched, phones cut off, mail halted. Ghost sat in the dark, his heart pounding. Someone was coming for those papers, he could feel it. And just like Marcus, he was now holding something that could destroy more than a career. It could expose an entire system built on silence. That night, while the others slept, he whispered to himself, "If Slim died for this, I can't let it die with him." He tore one page from the pile, the one with Lieutenant Stokes' signature, and folded it tight, sliding it into the lining of his shoe. The rest he wrapped in a plastic bag and hid behind the toilet drain. But in Pelican Bay, secrets don't stay buried for long. The next morning when roll call sounded, his cell door stayed locked. 2 officers arrived without saying a word. One of them was Stokes. Ghost's pulse quickened. Stokes leaned in close through the bars and whispered, "You've been asking questions that ain't yours to ask." He smiled faintly. Slim made that mistake too. Ghost clenched his fists, tattoos along his arms tightening like coiled ropes. "What did you do to him?" he asked. Stokes's smile widened. Justice was served. The door buzzed open. Ghost didn't move. He knew the next few minutes could decide everything, whether he vanished like Marcus or lived long enough to tell the truth. He took a deep breath, ready for whatever came through that door. But what happened next would prove that Marcus wasn't the last man punished for chasing justice. He was only the first. Ghost's heartbeat thundered in his ears as Lieutenant Stokes stepped into the cell, boots scraping against the cold concrete. The guard behind him carried a black bag, the kind used for contraband searches, but everyone inside Pelican Bay knew what it really meant: trouble. "Step back," Stokes ordered, his tone sharp. Ghost obeyed slowly, his eyes locked on the lieutenant's every move. He wasn't about to give them a reason to swing. Not yet. Stokes looked around the small cell, the metal bunk, the toilet, the cracked wall where paint peeled like old skin. "You been getting comfortable in here, huh?" Stokes said, running his gloved hand along the bed frame. "Almost like you forgot where you are." Ghost didn't answer. "Word is," Stokes continued, "you and Hargrove were tight. You like to talk. You like to listen." Still no response. Ghost knew silence was the only shield he had left. Stokes nodded to the other officer, who began tearing the cell apart. Sheets ripped, mattress slit open, toilet unscrewed. Dust filled the air. The guard even kicked the vent, but he didn't look behind the drain where Ghost had hidden the rest of the papers. After a few minutes, Stokes leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You see, Murphy, Pelican Bay runs on order. And when someone breaks that order, we fix it. Sometimes the fix ain't in the handbook." Ghost clenched his jaw. "You mean like what you did to Slim?" For a second the air froze. Stokes turned slowly, his face tightening. "What did you just say?" Ghost met his eyes. "You heard me. Stokes smirked. Careful. Words like that get men lost in the system. I'm already lost, Ghost said quietly. Stokes stepped closer until they were inches apart. Not yet, he whispered. But you're about to be. He snapped his fingers and the other officer grabbed Ghost's arm, twisting it behind his back. Ghost didn't fight, not yet. He knew that any resistance would land him in solitary before he had the chance to think. Take him to D block, Stokes ordered. As they dragged Ghost down the hallway, he saw other inmates watching from their cells, faces pressed to the glass, eyes wide but silent. Everyone in Pelican Bay knew better than to interfere. The system didn't just punish disobedience, it erased it. D-block was colder than the rest of the prison. It smelled of bleach and metal. The lights never turned off and the silence was heavy, the kind that wrapped around your throat. They shoved Ghost inside a small windowless cell and locked the door. He sat on the floor, chest rising and falling, his mind racing. He had one thing left, the folded page hidden in his shoe. He took it out, smoothing the creases. At the bottom of the form was Stokes' signature. But next to it, in faint pencil, was another name, Warden C. Monroe. That was it. The connection. The one Marcus had been chasing. The lieutenant wasn't acting alone. He was following orders from the very top. Ghost stared at the paper, realizing the truth. The justice system behind Pelican Bay wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, for those in power. Hours passed. No food. No water. Just the hum of the vent. Then faintly he heard footsteps. Someone was approaching. A voice whispered through the door, "Ghost? You still breathing in there?" It was Officer Lopez, the same young guard who had warned Marcus. Ghost moved closer. "How do you know my name?" Lopez glanced over his shoulder before speaking. "Because you're next. They think you got the files." Ghost's pulse quickened. "Do they know where they are?" Lopez shook his head. "Not yet. But they will. Stokes already told the warden you're hiding something. They're going to ship you out by morning." "Ship me out where?" Lopez hesitated. "No one comes back from where you're going." Ghost pressed his hand against the door. "Then help me. Marcus trusted you." Lopez's eyes flickered. "I tried to warn him. But once they marked him, there was nothing anyone could do." "Then why are you here?" Ghost asked. Lopez sighed. "Because I've seen too much." "You think it's just the inmates who get buried?" "Guards disappear too, the ones who don't follow the script." He leaned closer. "What you got in those papers, it's real. Transfers, money, deals, the warden runs all of it. The state thinks he's cleaning up gangs, but he's running his own." Ghost's eyes widened. "You can prove it?" Lopez nodded slightly. "Maybe. But if I help you, I need to disappear. My family too." "Then let's disappear together," Ghost said. Lopez swallowed hard. "You don't get it. You can't just walk out of Pelican Bay." He slid a small object under the door, a torn piece of paper. On it was a phone number written in pencil, barely legible. "If you ever make it out, call this. Tell them Lopez sent you. They'll know what it means." Ghost picked it up. "Who are they?" But Lopez was already backing away. "You don't want to know. Just remember, Stokes works for the warden, but the warden works for someone else." Then he was gone. Ghost sat in silence, gripping the note tightly. The fluorescent light buzzed above him like an angry hornet. He didn't know if he could trust Lopez, but he didn't have a choice. Hours turned into morning. The metal door clanged open and two transport officers stood waiting. "Murphy," one said, "pack your stuff." Ghost didn't have any. They shackled his wrists and ankles, the sound of chains echoing down the corridor as they led him out through a side door rarely used for transfers. Outside, fog rolled over the razor wire fences. The prison yard was empty. A black van idled by the gate, its headlights cutting through the mist. The doors opened and Ghost was shoved inside. The moment they pulled away from the compound, he noticed something strange. No escort vehicles, no destination paperwork, no route logs. Just silence and road. He tried to glance at the driver's ID, but the man's badge was turned backward. The passenger beside him didn't speak. Every mile they drove, his gut twisted tighter. This wasn't a normal transfer. After nearly 2 hours, the van slowed down on a deserted stretch of highway surrounded by redwoods. The driver pulled over. Ghost's throat went dry. The man in the passenger seat turned and said, "End of the road." Before Ghost could speak, the door opened and Lieutenant Stokes climbed in. "Well," Stokes said, brushing off his gloves, "I told you you'd get lost in the system." Ghost glared at him. "You think you can bury everything?" Stokes smiled. "I don't bury. I erase." He nodded to the driver. But before they could move, something unexpected happened. A sound in the distance. Sirens. Stokes's eyes snapped up. What the hell? Red and blue lights cut through the fog behind them. The driver cursed. Ghost saw his chance, one chance. He kicked hard, driving both shackled feet into Stokes's chest. The lieutenant slammed backward, gasping. Ghost twisted, forcing the door open, and threw himself out of the van. He hit the dirt hard, rolling down a slope as gunshots cracked through the air. He didn't stop. He ran into the forest, still in cuffs, heart hammering like thunder. The sirens grew louder behind him. Who were they? Police? Or someone else? He didn't know, but one thing was certain. Whatever justice looked like behind Pelican Bay's walls, it was coming for him now. The forest was dark and silent, except for Ghost's ragged breathing and the clinking of the shackles still tight around his wrists and ankles. Every breath burned his lungs. Every step through the thick underbrush was a fight for survival. The fog was heavy, swallowing the faint glow of the sirens behind him. He didn't know if he was running from the law or the people pretending to be it. The gunshots had stopped, but he knew they weren't far. The men from the van, Stokes included, would be sweeping the woods soon. Ghost crouched behind a fallen log, trying to stay calm. The cold metal cuffs dug into his skin as he reached for the folded note in his pocket, the one Lopez had given him. The pencil marks were almost smudged away by sweat. A phone number. He needed a phone. Somewhere deep in the forest, he saw the faint flicker of orange firelight. He crept closer until he spotted a small campsite near a dirt trail. Two men sat by the fire, their pickup truck parked nearby. Hunters. Ghost hesitated. If he walked out of the shadows and prison shackles, they might call the police. But if he didn't, he'd die out here. He stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling. Hey, I need help. Both men jumped to their feet. One reached for a rifle. Whoa. Ghost raised his hands. Please. I'm not gonna hurt you. I just need to make a call. The older man squinted through the smoke. You from Pelican Bay? Ghost froze. What makes you say that? The man pointed to the cuffs. Nobody around here wears those unless they're running from the bay. Ghost sighed. I'm not running from it. I'm running from what's inside it. The younger hunter looked uneasy. We should call this in, Hank. Wait. Ghost stepped closer, desperate. Please. I got proof that people in there are dying for nothing. The guards, the warden, they're all in it together. Just let me make one call. One call and I'm gone. Hank stared at him for a long moment. His eyes softened. You got 5 minutes. He handed Ghost a cracked flip phone from the truck's dashboard. Ghost's hands shook as he punched in the number from Lopez's note. The phone rang twice, then clicked. A woman's voice answered, calm and steady. Who is this? Name's Darnell Murphy, Ghost said, glancing over his shoulder. They call me Ghost. Lopez told me to call this number. Silence. Then, where are you? Near Highway 199. By the redwoods. You're out. Not by choice, Ghost replied. They tried to kill me. Another pause. Do you still have the files? Some of them. The rest are hidden inside Pelican Bay. Listen carefully, the woman said. You're not safe. We've been tracking what's happening in that prison for months. Falsified transfers, ghost inmates, forged reports. You have proof that ties it to the warden? Yeah, Ghost whispered. And to Lieutenant Stokes. A sharp inhale on the other end. Okay. Find somewhere to hide. I'll send someone to get you. Don't talk to anyone else. We'll find you. Who are you? Ghost asked. The line clicked. She was gone. Hank watched him hang up. You in some deep trouble, son? You have no idea, Ghost said quietly. Suddenly headlights flashed through the trees. A black SUV rolled up fast, tires grinding against gravel. Hank swore. You bring someone here? Ghost shook his head. No. Doors slammed. Men in dark uniforms stepped out, no badges visible. One shouted, Federal detention, drop your weapons. But their tone wasn't official. It was too calm, too practiced. Hank lifted his rifle slightly, uncertain. Ghost whispered, they're not cops. Gunfire erupted. Ghost dove for cover as bullets tore through the campsite. The truck's windshield shattered. Hank fell backward, clutching his shoulder. The younger man screamed, firing blindly into the fog. Ghost grabbed the fallen rifle and crawled toward the trees. His shackles slowed him down, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He looked back once. The SUV's lights flickered through the mist, and he saw Stokes standing there, expressionless, reloading his weapon. Their eyes met. Stokes raised the gun. Ghost ran. He sprinted through the forest, branches tearing at his clothes, feet sinking into wet earth. The fog made everything surreal, like running through a dream you couldn't wake from. Behind him, the SUV's engine roared to life. Ghost stumbled onto an old logging road and followed it downhill. In the distance, he saw a gas station light flickering weakly. Civilization. Maybe safety. He burst through the trees, dragging the chains behind him, and stumbled toward the gas station. Inside, a teenage clerk looked up in shock. "Call the police," Ghost shouted. "They're trying to kill me." The boy's mouth dropped open, but before he could move, the door swung open behind Ghost. Lieutenant Stokes walked in, his uniform stained with mud, gun drawn. Ghost turned slowly. "You just don't know when to quit," Stokes said, his voice low and calm. "You think anyone's gonna believe a convict over me?" Ghost backed up against the counter. "You can shoot me right here, but someone's coming for you. The files are already out." Stokes smirked. "No, they're not." Before Ghost could respond, flashing lights filled the parking lot, red and blue again. This time real police cars. Stokes cursed under his breath. "You called them?" Ghost shook his head. "Wasn't me." Officers burst through the doors, weapons raised. "Hands up. Both of you." For the first time, Stokes hesitated. He slowly set the gun on the counter, his eyes never leaving Ghost's. But then something strange happened. One of the officers walked straight past Ghost and went to Stokes. "We've got it from here, Lieutenant," he said quietly. Ghost froze. "Wait, what?" Stokes smiled faintly. "Told you, Murphy. Justice doesn't live here." The officers grabbed Ghost instead. He struggled, shouting, "He's the one running it. He's killing people inside. Check the files." But they didn't listen. They pinned him to the ground as Stokes adjusted his collar and walked out calmly into the night. As Ghost lay on the cold tile floor, the same words Marcus had once screamed echoed in his mind, "Tell them what's happening here." He couldn't give up now. Not after everything. Not after Marcus. As the cops dragged him toward the door, Ghost saw something, a figure standing by the police car watching. A woman. The same calm voice he'd heard on the phone. She nodded once, almost like a signal, before disappearing into the dark. Ghost's heart steadied. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Justice may be locked up, but it's not dead yet." What Ghost didn't know was that the woman who called him wasn't just an activist or a lawyer. She was part of an independent task force, a secret investigation already circling Pelican Bay and its corrupt officials. And thanks to Ghost, they had their first direct lead. But before they could move on the warden, Ghost would have to survive what came next, because the system was about to make its final move to silence him forever.